With the new VGC competitive format a month away, I thought it would be a good time to talk about some of the new Pokemon coming into the format, but instead of just going over their typings and all that stuff, I'm going to focus on calculations specifically today. And the Pokemon that I want to start calculating different EV spreads and how it will act in certain scenarios is Landorus. So I'm going to be doing both Landorus T and Landorus I, a couple builds for each, and see how they hold up to, you know, some ice types and maybe some other Pokemon as well. Let's start with like offensive Landorus. We got Therian form with Life Orb, 252 Adamant. We're going for as much damage as possible here, and this is a moveset that makes a lot of sense to me in this game if you want to run 4 attacks. 2 spread moves with Stomping Tantrum, which is a nice buff for Landorus, and Terra Blast, because this Pokemon could use a good flying move. And we'll start with the Picolytics Abomasnow. Why not? Has all these lovely moves. And all this lovely damage. Your Landorus will not enjoy seeing that, specifically. Even the Icy Wind is actually putting on a lot of offense, threatening a one-hit knockout. It's a 43% chance to one-hit KO with that Icy Wind. That's considerable. And if you're fighting Abomasnow, you are definitely fighting in snow, and your coverage move in the form of Rock Slide is not really putting out that much. And it's not like the most bulk that an Abomasnow can have, but it is a fairly bulky Abomasnow, so this is really not looking all that great for Landorus here. But there's a reason I put Terra Blast, because what if we actually give this thing a good flying move? Look at that Terra Blast. It is blowing past Abomasnow with overkill amounts of damage, and it really changes the potential for Landorus's offense, because if it can flip its typing to flying, it can play a role similar to how Dragonite plays right now, where they just Terra Flying and start Terra Blasting everything's face. This is another Pokemon that can do that quite well. And look, Blizzard is now only a 25% chance to KO. So even though you're still weak to Ice-type moves, getting rid of that 4X makes a big difference against something like Abomasnow, and Terra Blast is giving you offense that you normally would not have access to, which is actually a great buff to Landorus right here. So much so it may not even need Rock Slide anymore. You might could run a different move there, or just have Protect or Swords Dance, something like that. But since Rock Slide's very common, I thought I would throw it on there so you can kind of see the difference that Terra Blast makes here. That is, of course, if you're running Terra Flying. Okay, we're sticking with Landorus T, but we are switching over to an Assault Vest build, still quite offensive. It's Adamant 252, but it is half Speed F, half HP with the same moveset. And this time we're looking at Iron Bundle. Very popular Iron Bundle set with all the popular moves and that very popular high amounts of damage. So the Freeze Dry has a 62% chance of KOing, which is a significant number. You are threatened with a one-hit knockout, and that's gonna be pretty bad for Landorus here. But even the Hydro Pump is actually doing quite a bit of damage, which is gonna be something to consider. But can Landorus dish that back out? No. Kind of. We have several guaranteed 2-hit knockouts with this setup. Curiously, Earthquake's doing the same damage as a Rock Slide, which kind of makes me sad, with Stomping Tantrum doing just a little bit extra. And keep in mind, this is a bulky Assault Vest Landorus, and it's still taking a ton of damage from Freeze Dry. But let's check out that Terra Flying setup here. And as you can see, we now have a much more offensive option with the Terra Blast, doing considerably more than Stomping Tantrum and Earthquake and Rock Slide. It's still not enough for a one-hit knockout, but let's throw an Intimidate on there. And look, you are still guaranteed a 2-hit KO on this particular Iron Bundle build if you have the Terra Blast, which could be a deciding factor for a certain scenario. You never know. Bring that back up to neutral. And look at that. The Freeze Dry went from a 65% chance of a one-hit KO to a 57% chance of a 2-hit KO, which is a much different calculation and actually gives the Landorus a chance to wipe this thing out with its guaranteed 2-hit KO option of Terra Blast, even through an Intimidate. But what if you were running a defensive Terra? So let's say you were running Steel Terra. Look at that damage output from Bundle. It is completely gone. At most, the Hydro Pump is a guaranteed 3-hit KO. That is not guaranteed because we know Hydro Pump's accuracy is like 50%. So Bundle's not looking so good here in this scenario. And you can literally just pick whatever move you want. Terra Blast technically does the most damage here, so that would probably be the option you go for. But this is what makes the Terastallized gimmick so powerful, because if you can set up a scenario where keeping your Landorus alive for one extra turn wins the game for you, a Terra Steel against an Ice type could just completely change the game for you. Keep in mind this is still the bulky Assault Vest build. That's why Freeze Dry is doing literally nothing. Just shows how important resist spreads are and stuff, and how much potential Landorus has in a Terastallized format. Okay, one more Landorus T, and then we'll start calcing some Landorus I stuff. This is going to be a choice Scarf build, because Scarf Landorus, as we know, has been a thing before. And I'm still running Terra Blast on this, although it's less useful on a Scarf build, it's still useful. And on the other side, we have Regieleki, a very normal, high special attack, high speed build with Timid. And I'm just running Life Orb on it. And the first thing I want to point out is the speed stats here. If you're up against a max speed Eleki, a Scarf Landorus is not going to be faster, because as you can see, the speed stat's actually 235 versus 277. And even a modest Eleki that's 252, you're still... However, a Scarf Landorus will be faster than a no speed investment Eleki. And that calculation may matter, because Eleki doesn't get a lot of benefit being run max speed in this format, unless you're fighting other Elekis a lot. Because max speed Eleki does not outspeed a booster bundle or a booster Fluttermane, so that extra speed investment's just not really worth anything. But if you have, say, Tailwind or another speed control option like your own booster bundle, and you get the speed drop onto like a booster Fluttermane, a no speed investment Eleki will be faster than the Fluttermane with a speed drop. So that's a very important calculation here. So I don't see a lot of need to run like a 252 Eleki. At the most, maybe like a half speed Eleki, and then you can put some bulk in there, which we'll try and calculate an Eleki like this. This makes a lot more practical sense, I think, for how Eleki will actually be used. And you notice I have Terra Blast here, because Eleki can now run coverage that it never had access to before, and we're gonna make it an Ice type. And would you look at that? Oh, Landorus is not living that Terra Blast. That is a lot of damage. And even a super effective Rock Slide here is doing as much as the ground moves, so you're not really getting a lot of benefit here from running Rock Slide. But you do have a guaranteed 2-hit KO on it, but Eleki is going to, well, you're not living that. There's no way. I don't even think Assault Vest can save you from that massive of a number. But we have Flying Terra type now. And would you look at that? That Terra Blast has an 87.5% chance to 1-hit KO. That's a good amount. You actually have a higher chance of getting a 1-hit KO than Hydro Pump hitting. It is at least better than that. That's actually better than Will-O-Wisp too, I think. The only issue with this is Eleki no longer has to use Terra Blast, and Thunderbolt's still a ridiculous amount of damage. But they would have to predict you flipping your typing to flying and yada yada yada. But I guess we could always try the defensive Steel Terra. Oh, yes. Perfect. That's super effective onto Ice Terra. Eleki just blows it up. And Eleki actually has a 50% 1-hit KO chance on a neutral hit with Thunderbolt. That's Life Orb, of course. Oh, wait a minute. That's with the not nerfed Transistor, I'm pretty sure. Transistor's damage supposedly has been reduced from a 1.5 times boost to 1.3, so that's not accurate actually, and probably does not have a 50% chance of 1-hit KO. It's probably more like 30-ish. You know what? It might not 1-hit KO at all, which really changes the game here. Makes Eleki a lot less scary. Still strong, but you're not going to be wiping out a Steel Terra Landorus just like that. Though, man, this Rock Slide just doesn't feel like it's doing anything helpful here, outside of giving you a hit onto flying types. Okay, we're moving over to Landorus I, and this is probably nearly the only set you would probably run, with the main difference being instead of timid running modest, you kind of want a sheer force Life Orb Landorus to be very offensive with a lot of speed. Now there's probably some sets that people run that have a little bit extra bulk scattered around, but generally this is close to what you can expect out of this type of Landorus. And this is the moveset that I think would make a lot of sense too. You don't have to run Terra Blast on this if you don't need the flying type offense, and you won't get the sheer force bonus. So all of these moves get the sheer force bonus, which combined with Life Orb is just a lot of damage. But we are calcing into Glastrier, actually. And look at that Icicle Crash. Man, that's a lot. Let me show you the EV spread. I have a Assault Vest, somewhat bulky offensive build with Adamant and just running 4 attacks. It no longer gets high horsepower. It actually got a moveset nerf. And if you look at its moveset on Cerebi, it's quite a slim moveset. There's not a whole lot of options this thing gets. So I'm curious to see how that's going to affect it long term, because like it doesn't get Ice Spinner. It no longer gets high horsepower. And basically your only other offensive options are like close combat and heavy slam. So there is double edge too, but you probably don't want to run double edge on this. The moveset's kind of nerfed, but it's still going to be incredibly strong in certain scenarios. And look at this. This is a Life Orb Sheer Force Landorus, and it is just almost bouncing off of that Glastrier. Which, this is what makes Glastrier so strong. And I imagine in a snow team with an Aurora Veil Abomasnow, this Assault Vest build would be invincible. Actually, hang on. Let's do Snow, not like it really matters, but Aurora Veil. Look at this. Like, Glastier's taking no damage. Even if these hits were super effective, let's just make some of these super effective and just get rid of Snow real quick. Let's say Glastier's suddenly weak to ground, and I forgot to click that. So yeah, even with Glastrier weak to ground, in Aurora Veil, you kind of have a chance of a 2-hit KO. Kind of. But this is with a very offensive build, and that's with Earth Power. If Glastrier is next to, say, Redirection, you'll have to use Sandsear Storm, which is a guaranteed 3-hit KO, but you're doing a lot less damage. And man, even this Heavy Slam is threatening with a guaranteed 2-hit KO, which I guess you could just run Steel Terra and bump that up to a lot. Witch Ground will still be super effective on that, and that calculation's the same. But this Heavy Slam is actually putting out a ton of offense with Steel Terra. But we'll be fair, let's take off Auroraville now, and yeah, Landorus does a lot of damage, because this is a guaranteed 2-hit KO, and this is a much more guaranteed 2-hit KO. So the offensive potential of Landorus is definitely here, but you're gonna have to, but you'll probably want to work with its super effectives to really make the most of it. If you do have that option, let's say you're fighting a Namorous, the Sludge Bomb's going to be doing a lot of damage to a Namorous. Or, you know, Tyranitar's not going to want to take 2 of these Earth Powers. So Landorus Eye has a lot of potential. Even though it doesn't seem that impressive into Glastrier, that's because Glastrier is built like a tank, and this is a very bulky build. Okay, now for some not-so-ice types. We're still using Landorus Eye here, and same build, but let's take a look at Ursaluna. So this is an incredibly offensively built Ursaluna without any attempt to optimize the EVs. It's just 252 HP, Guts, Flame Orb, Brave, with all the offensive moves you could imagine. Look at this facade. That is stupid amounts of damage. I know people have been talking about Ursaluna being a major offensive threat, and Guts 252 is massive amounts of offense with that facade. You might actually want a Ghost type against this thing, because you don't want anything getting hit by that. And Landorus is doing pretty good offense back into it though, which is, as long as you are able to maintain speed control, like resetting their Trick Room or playing around your opponent's Trick Room, you can beat Ursaluna with Landorus. You're just gonna have to make sure it doesn't get hit. Or what about a defensive Terra? If we have, say, Terra Steel, you do live that facade. Just make sure they don't read it, otherwise Headlong Rush is going to send you back to the lobby in an instant. And if you were really going weird and running Ghost Terra type, you would then be immune to that facade. Headlong Rush still 1-hit KOs though. That is something you're going to have to consider when you're fighting Ursaluna. using a defensive Terra to be neutrally effective might not actually save you. And Landorus is not exactly the squishiest Pokemon. It's like 89 HP, 90 defense. It could be bulkier, but Ursaluna's insane as far as damage goes. Still though, good damage back into it. Okay, last calculation for this video. We have the same Landorus I build, and this time we have Fluttermane. Just a very generic Fluttermane. I'm not putting any items on it, with all the usual moves that you would expect. Fluttermane's doing pretty good damage into Landorus. We have guaranteed 2-hit knockouts on 2 of the options here. Dazzling Gleam's doing an okay amount of damage too. Landorus is actually putting on more offense with the Earth Power though. So if you are able to get speed control against a Fluttermane, even hitting on the special defense, that's kind of why I wanted to count Landorus I into Fluttermane, because even on the special defense, this is still doing a lot of damage. Sandsear is still a guaranteed 2-hit KO as well, which does actually matter in case you're fighting some redirection in the form of like Amoonguss or whatever. And if this Fluttermane wants to get ambitious and switch to Fairy Terra, that Moonblast does not actually one-hit KO without an offensive item. But since Pixie Plate has now been added, let's put that there, and we have an 81% chance of a knockout with the Fairy Terra boost. But Landorus can return the favor with a 68% chance of 1-hit KO out of the Sludge Bomb. So this is an interesting fight between the two, and this one more so comes down to like outplaying your opponent rather than just relying on particular calcs or whatever. With any calculation, outplaying your opponent's more important than the actual numbers, because you have to get the right move onto your opponent at the right time, and sometimes that's just 50-50s, because if this Landorus decides it wants to be Terra Steel, your Moonblast is not 1-hit KOing. Good chance of 2-hit KO though. You're probably better off using Shadow Ball for that absolute guaranteed chance of 2-hit KO. But that's the thing about terrestrialization. Typings can flip in an instant, and what seemed like just a guaranteed knockout suddenly becomes not a guaranteed knockout, and it can really throw off a particular turn and swing it in your favor. But the outplaying part is baiting your opponent into doing it with no gain. If they don't benefit from the turn that they terrestrialize, you can then just play around it as a steel type and get your fire type to go blow up this Landorus here. Just don't let it get hit by a Earth Power, you know. So what are we thinking about Landorus? Landorus Eye is very strong, and having access to the new Sandsear Storm that is boosted by Sheer Force. Landorus Eye now has a very threatening spread move that it can play with that's going to make it super annoying. But I would not sleep on a Terra Flying Landorus T. I actually think that might be replacing the Terra Flying Dragonites, because Landorus T actually has more physical offense than Dragonite. It just doesn't have a good flying type move, same as Dragonite. So running Terra Blast with Terra Flying, you're getting so much more utility out of Landorus than you ever did have. And also having access to Stomping Tantrum, you get a single target ground type move. That matters so much. So you don't keep smacking your teammate with an Earthquake when you're trying to get ground type offense off into your opponent. Both forms have more utility than they used to, and from the calculations, things are looking pretty good for Landorus in this format. Obviously, some of this stuff will come down to your game knowledge and your understanding of what your opponent's trying to get off onto you. But if you do have that understanding of the game, I think Landorus is going to be a great option to build teams with, and it might even be a Pokemon you just kind of throw in teams, similar to how Fluttermane kind of gets thrown into every team right now. I could see the same happening to Landorus, and running those max speed, max attack Landorus, or even the more bulky Assault Vest options. I think both are super good and are going to give you a lot of utility as long as your team is set up to work well with them. But anyway, that's a different viewpoint of kind of checking some of the competitive viability. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of this style of video, and if you want me to do it for some other Pokemon. And if you really like the content, you can do the algorithm buttons with the subscribes and all that. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.